At times, I would definitely say that we haven't always done well at that.
And I haven't sometimes, and always when I haven't done this, the process doesn't go well.
We are trying to be more intentional about what we do because it's so important.
If I had £1 for every time I'd heard that, I would be a very, very wealthy man.
Leading a church used to be predictable. I mean, you preached, you pastored, you planned the next series. But these days, trying to change one thing, just one thing, and it feels like you've set off a fire alarm. Somewhere between vision and Sunday service, the pushback starts. Why are we changing so fast? What about us regulars? This doesn't feel like my church anymore. Does that sound familiar? So today we're meeting 3 brilliant church leaders who are leading their church to a bolder vision, to becoming truly outward facing. But let me tell you, it hasn't all been happy clapping and cute cupcakes. So how do you lead through criticism without burning out or backing down? And how do you take your church on a journey when half of them didn't ask for a ticket? So what does it look like to build a church where new people feel at home before insiders feel disrupted?
So let's talk about it, shall we? Let's dive right in, boys. Thank you very much for being part of the conversation. Leon, let me start with you, because I think it's a good place to start. One of the criticisms I hear a lot from church leaders who are trying to create an outward-facing church is they get this pushback from people who say, we don't go deep enough with the preaching anymore. It's not deep enough. Yeah. I'm sure that's never this whole deep teaching thing. How do you react and respond to that kind of pushback?
Yeah, if I had £1 for every time I'd heard that, I would be a very, very wealthy man. And I think that's true of church leaders all around the world. Yeah. So I think for me with this one, I think what we need to do is first clarify or help the person clarify, what do you mean when you say deep?
Yes.
Try and explain to me what are you saying? What is the pushback? So I think sometimes with pushback we can be dismissive, we can be defensive, but I think sometimes a better posture is to say, just help me understand, when you say deep, what are you meaning? And I think inevitably people mean it's not theological enough, but actually what they really mean is it's not confusing enough. Because I think what actually happens is that when they've heard something deep, they think, oh, it's so deep, I didn't understand the word of it, And I think for us, in the kind of churches that we want to be, creating outward-facing churches, depth in the Bible is never about knowledge, it's always about application. And I think that's how I say, hey, what do you mean by deep? Help me understand that. Then let's unpack that a little bit. It's about application, not about knowledge. To be deep, to be really deep means you're out of your depth.
Yes.
And you're fully trusting in God, and the way you are with your kids and your family and your finances and your thought life and your work life, and you're trusting God. That's real depth.
Yeah.
Not how much knowledge I have. Now, knowledge is important, but I just think we need to help people clarify that as well. I think the other thing with deep is that sometimes I think we have to, as leaders who are trying to create outward-facing churches, recognise that we're trying to help all people, not just those who are trying to find faith, and people are at different stages. So actually, sometimes I would push the boat out a little bit, but all the time, not trying to be confusing, so that people think, oh, isn't he clever? Look at all those words he knows. But actually, so that people, I never knew that. I never knew that about the Bible. Wow. And I want to do something with it. And when someone wants to do something with what they know, to me, that's deep. So I think that's the kind of way that I would approach the pushback. I want to understand first, what do you mean? And then let's open up what real depth is in the Bible.
I love that, depth being more about action and more about what we do rather than just knowledge in itself. Absolutely. I remember a lady came to me in church once and she said, I don't like your teaching, it's not deep enough. And I asked that question, what do you mean by deep? And it was brilliant because she said, well, to be honest, she said, you're not boring enough. She said, I know it's been deep when someone's been boring. You're far too entertaining. And I said, well, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to go away and take that as a
work on that.
I appreciate
it. That's right.
Work on that as a compliment.
Develop that boring skill. Absolutely.
What about you boys? Do you ever get that kind of level there?
Yeah.
Not the boring.
No, Steve gets the no. Go on.
I would say I think that it's when speaking and teaching, it's clarifying what is only applicable to Christians and what is applicable to all. And so I like being able to give people an opt-out if they're not a follower of Jesus yet. But you know, practically all of the New Testament is teaching followers of Jesus, and so therefore it's to be able to say that if you're a follower of Jesus, this isn't an opt-out. This is essential, and that pushes that whole application side of things as well.
I think the other thing for me is that, I mean, in our church we've had a lot of unchurched people come to faith in recent years, which is great. They need to go somewhere with that as well. So I think the other thing we talk about is not everything has to happen on a Sunday morning. So we try to create some other spaces where, so at the moment we're about to launch a brand new thing we're developing called Solid Ground, which is going to look at some theology and to look at some foundations of your faith where we might go deeper, whatever that word means, than we can on a Sunday morning. So again, I think to acknowledge that actually people do need other things, but always depth is connected to application. So if we want to find some spaces where we can go deeper, it's got to result in more application, not just deeper knowledge.
It's one of those things, you know, when you go into a bar, they put little peanuts on the bar. You know, why do they put peanuts on the bar for free? Because the more peanuts you eat, the more thirsty you are. You know, and I don't think it's our job as preachers to feed people. It's to make them hungry for more of God. And so, you know, people say it's not deep enough, I'm not getting fed. Well, actually, I'm not there to feed you. I'm there to make you hungry. I'm there to for you to go, God, I need more of this. You know, if all you did was to come to my house on a Sunday and eat my Sunday roast and then think that'll do me for the week. I don't need any more food. It's ridiculous. And yet we come to church and think, I'll listen to the preacher preach for 25 minutes and that will do me for the week. No. We want people to be so enthralled with Jesus and so enthralled with the scriptures that they can't wait for Monday to roll around so they can dive deeper into him themselves. So we're there to feed,
inspire them on,
to feed themselves, to become self-feeders. I mean, it's like a kid, isn't it? If you've got a kid who's 18 years old and mum's still cutting his food up for him, that's bad parenting. And if our flock are still expecting us to feed them, that's bad pastoring in my view. So what do you...
Well, for me, this conversation is really interesting because I think there's a difference in the New Testament between preaching and teaching. And I think it's really important we understand the difference. Well, because the two different words used, we talk about knowledge, but in the Greek, two different words used. Do you like that? So boring. And one, the word for preaching means a monologue, and it means an inspiring to action, a call to action, a proclamation of good news. And that, you know, when we're preaching on a Sunday, that's what we're doing, because we're not inviting dialogue. It's too complicated in churches with lots of people there and that kind of stuff. But we need that. We need to be inspired with a call to action. And that's what you were saying, Duncan, about then going away and being made thirsty to go and feed ourselves. But then we need teaching. And teaching, the word literally means a conversation. And teaching is best done in a dialogue context. And I think we need both.
That's really interesting, because what we're seeing as well is with young adults coming to faith in the whole Gen Z quiet revival thing that everyone's talking about. And we've seen some of that. They are being inspired on a Sunday, but now they're saying, I need to learn more about the Holy Spirit. I need to learn more about what is my salvation and what does the word sanctification mean and all of this. So they're inspired through preaching into that journey of faith, but then they do want to explore that. And I think we as communicators do need to acknowledge that as well. And I think that when we get in the pushback, try and say, that's really helpful what you just said there, to try and say, actually, it's not all on a Sunday morning, you know, and actually some of it is you, like you've said, you know, but then some of it is what we're offering as churches as well, and the breadth of that.
It's really helpful. I mean, I don't know a lot of Greek. I mean, kebab is the only Greek word I know, so I won't go deep into that. But what I have done is I've dived into AI, and I've posed that question. All the questions I'm going to ask you, I've posed to AI, and I've said, what would someone like Andy Stanley or Carey Nieuwhof say about these questions? So this is apparently what Andy would say about the pushback of we don't get enough preaching. He says this: depth is doing, not just knowing, which is what you said. If people understand what to do with what they've heard, that's deep. Jesus didn't teach in theological monologues, which is what you were saying. He told stories people remembered and applied, which I think is great.
And I think the other thing is that sometimes what people mean by that deep thing is boring, or telling me something I didn't already know, or saying something complicated. But I think you'd have to apply that critique to Jesus. I often say to people, well, the very thing you're talking about, you'd have to say to Jesus, because he didn't do complicated. He did profound. And for me, that's a massive difference.
If you were running Spring Harvest or something like that, you would never invite Jesus to be the Bible teacher. There's only one time I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can only think of one time in the scriptures where Jesus opens the scriptures and teaches from it, and that was the two on the road to Emmaus. That's the only one I can remember.
as well.
Yeah,
At the very start. Okay, that's good. There's two. The rest of the time, he told stories. It was all parables. He told stories.
But if we did what he said, so I always talk to people about this example. Jesus says, love God, love other people, right? That's not complicated. That's not difficult to understand. Anybody can understand that, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, Jesus follower or not. What would happen if we all loved God and loved Jesus? I mean, that would be profound life change, right? So it's profound, not complicated. And for me, that's an important distinction.
Profound, not complicated. On that note, let's move on to the second one. Steve, I'm going to dive in with you. Another pushback I hear a lot from church leaders is people in their congregation, when they're trying to become outward facing, people in the congregation are saying, now we're being facing towards outsiders, we're ignoring the needs of the kind of long-term members, we're ignoring the needs of the insiders. And I don't like that. Have you heard that pushback? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one. I think often when we create outward-facing churches, people think that we are church for the unchurched. And that's not what our mission is. And so for the church that I'm involved with, our mission or our vision is to be a church community that unchurched people love to be part of. So straight away, what are we? We're a church community. A church community will involve people who are new, but will involve long-term people. And so when that question comes up again, it's clarifying what does that mean? What needs are no longer being met? What is it that you want? Are you still known? Are you still involved? Are you still being cared for? All of those things. And so I think bringing clarity to what it is that they feel that they have lost becomes really important. And so when this comes up, I will often talk about are they serving? And I will ask, are they serving? Because if you are part of the mission of the church, you belong. You're playing a part. You're being part of the story of seeing others coming to faith. So I think that if they're serving, my role is to be able to thank them, to remind them of why we do what we do. My job is to tell stories of, look, what you have done has helped the mission of the church. You help this person find faith, get baptized, take a step forward towards Jesus. So I think for those that are asking, I always want to make sure that they're serving. I want to make sure that they're part of a group because that's where accountability happens. That's where, when we talk about teaching and about teaching being more of a conversation, small groups are by far the best way. So if they want to go deeper, then that's in a sense, that's the place to be able to do just that. I also will often ask, have you invited someone? Because I think as soon as you invite someone to church, you see church differently. Because you want your friend to connect. You want your friend to think, I like this, I want to come back. And so all of a sudden you see things differently. And so until people are inviting, I think often they will struggle to fully get what it is. So interesting, I had a conversation with a lady about 4 weeks ago who I sat down next to her and I said, it's so lovely that you're back at church again. She'd had about 5 years away and she says, I'm loving it. And she says, I get it now. She says, my 18-year-old son has come to church, and so I come with him. And I get it now. Wow. And so for me, that was just kind of joyful, but she left because it wasn't deep enough teaching and, all of those. I know, that's right. Yeah. So one of the things which I will often remind people who are part of our church, and especially if they've been part of the church for a long time, is that they are not the mission of the church, but join us on the mission of the church. Be a part of seeing the mission of reaching the lost, be a part of that. And I think that then we grow.
Yeah.
Of course we do. Because if we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable place where we need God to work, I tell you, we're going to grow and thrive. So I do come back to what is it that's missing? Is it that they feel ignored? If so, get involved. I'll work with them to help with that. So I do think that it's a journey. But
you mean church isn't about me?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a,
But very quickly, one of the core foundations is to develop a plan for discipleship here within our network.
Yeah.
And so, if someone has been part of our church for a long time, but they haven't understood what discipleship is, then we haven't communicated well, or they haven't been listening. And so, therefore, some more work needs to go into that.
I think one of the issues with pushback, I know when I was younger, I would get very dismissive and defensive and do the whole, oh, you're just selfish, it's just all about you. And I think now, actually, I'm trying not to go to that one, because actually sometimes that's not the issue. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. There are some other nuances of stuff going on there. And I remember as a younger leader saying, publicly, it's just not about you, it's about all those people that don't know Jesus. And the problem, I don't communicate like that now, because I'm saying you're not important, and they absolutely are. Do you know what I mean? Because Jesus died for every single person, and they all need grace, those in front of me who are Christians and those who aren't yet. So I remember a friend of mine who's actually part of the network, and he says something like, the church is for you, but it's not all about you. So again, it's that trying to hold that nuanced thing together, really, that actually you are part of this mission, and therefore I think you are important. Not just the other pushback that I used to get when I used to communicate like that was, you only want us for the mission.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's the mission's all about the people out there, and that's not right neither. Do you know what I mean? Because I think if actually I don't love the people I'm trying to serve as well as the people I'm trying to reach, something's wrong with me as a leader. So I think there is, with this pushback, I think there is some things for us to reflect on. I think so.
Yeah, and also I think for people who have been part of the church for a long time, they've served in a certain place, and often it's a case of, I need to step back, I need to let some, and then they don't know where they fit.
That's right.
And so again, that's where I think that in a sense that's a different.
That's different.
That's a different kind of position to be kind of addressing, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful point, and that's like the clarifying the pushback.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are you really? Because I think it's like with everything, what someone says is the reason is obviously not often not. It's the thing beneath the thing. What's really going on for that person underneath. I think if we take a little bit of time, I remember for us when I first took over leadership, all the elders, which are like the leaders in our church, once they stepped off eldership, they all left the church.
Wow.
All of them.
Wow.
And I remember as young leaders saying, "This is not right. What's going on here?" So actually said to some of them, hey, why don't we try and do things differently? So for 25 years, when someone steps off the elders, they go on to this former elder group, and every month they meet and they pray for us.
Brilliant.
Every month. So one of them passed away recently in their late 80s, and so they're still engaged.
I love that.
In the mission, because I think for them it was, I don't know where I fit.
Yeah.
Now we're doing this, I don't know where I fit now. So I think there's some work for us to do there with that pushback.
So Chris, you transformed or transitioned a church that was fairly traditional as a Baptist church into what it is today at Andover. Did you get that pushback from people saying this isn't about me anymore? You're ignoring the needs of those of us who've been here for 25 years?
Yeah, a little bit. It was more often it came in the thing in the words of, well, you're just all about unchurched people now.
Yeah.
That would be how it would come. Yeah. Sometimes, perhaps more in you're ignoring the needs of, but again, I think that there is an important thing to do there to say, well, just unpack what you mean by that. And sometimes it would literally be, people would say, and they'd tie it in with the preaching thing, your preaching's only for unchurched people. And so I would sit with them and I'd just say, well, look, just take me through what you used to really enjoy, and they'd take me through what they enjoyed, and it wasn't any different.
Yes.
The difference was we were explaining some things.
Yes.
That's honestly the only difference.
Understanding it.
Yeah, well, and also we were just saying, if you're not a Christian, you're exploring faith, this is what, or actually this isn't for you, this is about the Christians, or if we were saying, and this letter's written by a guy called Paul, and then we do those kind of 30-second explainers we talk about with who was Paul. So some of our Christians were kind of going, oh, so this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But when you just explained why and said, but it's not actually different, is it? It's just that we've got a little bit more language in it. They'll go, oh, okay, and then they could press back in again. So I think sometimes it was just about listening and just about asking the questions again of, well, why is this? How do you think this is different from what it used to be? And very often it's not. It's just that we're using some different language.
I think that's right. I think to me the question I use the most, try to use the most now, I didn't used to when I was younger, is can you help me understand? Can you help me understand why you think that? Can you help me understand why you feel that? Because that then creates a posture of openness, and then you're listening not just for what they say but for what they're not saying, and the things that are underneath.
I love that maturity. You've gone from Gladys, you're wrong, get out of here, to help me understand, Gladys, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I AI'd this and asked what Kerry Newhoff might have to say, and I love what he said. It's great. He says, we're not ignoring anyone. We're asking those who are spiritually mature, which is what you talked about, Steve, to help us reach those who aren't, which is great, isn't it? That's what we're not ignoring people who've been around a long time. We're asking those of us who are spiritually mature to help those who aren't. A church that only serves its members eventually dies. When insiders sacrifice for outsiders, everyone grows. So if we just feed the insiders, we'll die. But I love it, when insiders sacrifice for outsiders, everyone grows.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Go.
It's not mine, but it is brilliant. Some of you will have heard this, okay, because it's a friend of mine who's like a world famous communicator. It's about a stripper whose name was Nikki, and she became a Christian in my friend's church in America, and she got baptized one night, and on this night she got baptized, she turned up to the church in the clothes that she would have worn in her work, with all of the bouncers from the club and the other girls as well, and they all came in because they're unchurched. They all came and sat on the front row. The young fellas signed up for the welcome team. They were sat, when my friend tells the story, and literally she came, she got baptized, several of her friends got saved, the other dancers, the other girls, the bouncers. It revolutionised the church. And an old lady, a long-term member of the church, came up to the pastor at the time and said, "You've ruined our church."
Wow.
Do you know what he said? And he had way more grace and maturity than I did. He said, "Maybe you're right, but you've been a Christian a long time. Could you help me with this mess that God seems to have created?"
Brilliant.
And she looked at him and she thought, "I can do that."
Brilliant.
And I just think it's like there's grace needed for those who are long-term members as well. If their heart is open with some explanation and the right thing, I think there's grace for them as well. Now, if they are, "No, we can't, and you shouldn't have done this," and they push back and push back and push back, that's a whole different conversation. But I love that story.
It's
because I just think,
and I mean, much of this comes down to it's a change that takes place in the life of a church, isn't it? And whether you're a long-term person or not, we all struggle with change if it's out of our control. So and so I think it's working with people through that.
Let's push on to the next one. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you. One of the things that, again, I've heard labelled at churches that are trying to be more outsiders focused is you get a lot more strategic. When I come into your office, it's less Bibles on the shelves and there's more strategic plans and whiteboards and scribbles on the walls. And so you get a lot of people, and I've heard this time and time again, saying, this doesn't feel like a church anymore, it feels like a business. How do you deal with that kind of pushback?
You made this one. And again, I know we keep referencing Leon here, and the point he made right at the top of this conversation, but I think it's so important. Again, what are they actually saying? So I've heard that in a whole range of things. So sometimes it's about finance, and we're getting too business with our finance. And then I'll say, if it's a finance question, I'll say, well, don't you want us to run the finances well and with transparency? Surely you, and people say, oh yes, of course. So it does depend on what people mean. Are they meaning? And again, I think a good pushback actually is if we're becoming too corporate.
That's good.
So sometimes people mean this now feels more like a corporation than a community.
That's good.
Well, that's a good challenge. That's a right challenge. We need to hear that because that's not what we're about.
That's right.
Sometimes it's about the leader seeming to adopt the pose of a CEO, and people say, well, no, we're not CEOs. That's right. Yes, we're strategic leaders, and I'm absolutely passionate about us leading well if we're in senior leadership in a church, but we're not CEOs. We're called to a multiplicity of leadership. We're called to a plurality of leadership, not to be a sole person telling everybody what must do. So there's a useful challenge there. If people mean something slightly different, which is, well, it used to feel all kind of anarchic and chaotic, and now it feels planned. Well, then I've got a slightly different answer, because I think planning is good. And one of the things I love that I've gained a lot from our partnership and connection with North Point Community Church is intentionality. And that feels me to, I would use that word more than strategic.
That's good.
It's intent. Yes, you're absolutely right. we are trying to be more intentional about what we do because it's so important. I remember I used to work in the corporate world, and I remember going from corporate world to church world. And I remember in corporate world, even if our profits started flatlining, even if they weren't growing in double digits, you get everybody around the table, and you'd have days and days of, what can we do? How can we change it? And that was just about generating more money. We're about people's eternal destinies. And I used to go into the church world and think, why are we not concerned here that there's this decline? And, why are we not calling all the people together and getting around and having a proper conversation about this? So I think it's really important that we understand what people are asking. And if people are saying now it's more planned, more intentional, more strategic, then I think it's worth saying, well, can we just have a talk about that? Because actually we take this so seriously. This is so important that we think it's really worth having some deep, proper conversations, prayer-led, spirit-inspired conversations to say, how can we do better? And of course, ultimately, it's God's responsibility, but we are supposed to play our part. There's a partnership thing going on, and we need to do it to the best that we possibly can. And so when it comes to discipleship or reaching new people or whatever, let's have a plan for that, and let's build those in the right way. But I think God can work through us for way more potential when we get intentional about what we're doing.
Intentionality.
Intentionality.
That's really good.
You had that pushback?
Yeah, I think often it comes down to language that we use as well. That if we're talking about an organisation or we're talking about a church family, people feel much safer in using kind of church or church language than business language. And I think as you call on people with business experience within the life of the church, of course, that's not necessarily going to be their first language as such. And so I think that often people get afraid because we're not talking about ministry. We're talking about an organisational thing. And so therefore, I just think we have to be careful, but also explain our language.
That's very wise to think about our posture and our language, because that could put people off. It's really wise.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus, when he was just 12 and he was in the temple and they found him, he said, I must be about my Father's business. And used that word, business, didn't he? I know it meant differently, but there is something like, I think that's so great what Chris said. And I think for me, it's not just the language, it's the why behind what we do. And this is so important. And I think a lot of business people, certainly in our experience as well, when they see the church that is well led, that is strategic, that is intentional, and for a reason which is way more inspiring than anything they're doing in their business lives, they want to actually get involved. They say, this is going to change the world. Why wouldn't we want to put everything into it? And at the same time, be on our knees saying, God, unless you come, nothing's going to happen anyway. And again, I think one of the big challenges I think we have in this area is teaching, communicating, and helping people to understand it's not either or, it's both and. But that organisation, that intentionality is really, really important.
It's not either or, it's both and. That's so profound, Leon. When I'd planted a church, wrong phrase. I started a church in 1994 from scratch. And we had a leader in that church, and me and him used to butt heads quite a bit. And his view was, in terms of the future, we just put up our sail and see where God blows us. And me being more of a strategic guy used to frustrate me. And I would be the other end of the scale saying, we have to strategically plan whether we have butter or margarine on our toast in the morning. It's got to be strategic, And I think I should have learned a bit from him, and he could have learned maybe a bit from me as well. And there's something about, yes, there are times when we need to down tools and say, Father, we need to hear from you. And there are other times when we need to say, enough is enough. It's almost like God is saying, I've given you everything you need. There are lost people out there. Go find them. And it's and I do think about the plan that Jesus left his disciples was incredibly strategic.
It was.
Start here in Judea. Start selling to the people locally. Then we'll move out to the county, and then we'll move out to the bigger, wider area, the country, and then maybe we'll go to the ends of the earth. There was an intentional, strategic plan there. So I don't think it's one or the other. It's both and.
And I think, Paul was the same, right? If you look at what Paul did, when he went to new communities, he said, where is everybody? Where can I go? Where can I start talking to people? What cultural icons can I draw in to what I'm going to say to people to connect them? I just see huge strategic and again maybe intentionality about Paul and Jesus in what they did. we throw that out at our peril, I think.
Yeah, and I think within that, then there are, like I think you guys have said, there are those little moments where we as leaders need to reflect on how are we engaging with the people. I mean, we've got becoming more and more multicultural, and some of our friends, brothers and sisters, as they would call themselves as well, who are joining us, are a little bit like, "Are you really the pastor?" Do you know what I mean? Because we can talk to you, and you're not in a suit and all of that. And again, that I think accessibility is our superpower. And even if you're not pastorally gifted in that way, accessibility is a superpower. And I think that demystifies the things a little bit, and it takes away from that sense that this is a cold organisation with a CEO at the top somewhere that you can never see. And I just think even as the church gets bigger and grows, we can still be accessible. We can't be accessible to everybody, but we can be accessible, and I think that's really important.
I've noticed all of your churches. I've noticed that on a Sunday when you get up and speak, you're sat with the people and you walk up some steps onto the stage from the people. You don't sit on a throne on the stage. You're not giving this impression. But many churches do. You know, you don't see the pastor. The pastor sits on a throne and walks off into some vestry somewhere. And I love that sense of I'm coming from just one of you, and we're sharing together. I AI'd this, and I said to AI, what would Andy say to someone who pushed back and said, it feels more like a business? And we've all been to North Point, and that's quite a business-orientated organisation, isn't it? You know, and I love what Andy said. He said this: strategy and excellence don't mean we've stopped being the church. Jesus said, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves.
It's good.
It's really good. Really good. Okay, let's push on to the next one. I'm going to dive back to you, Leon, and I want to ask you this question. And again, we're bringing change to the church. We're trying to change the church from being inward focused to being outward focused. And people say these changes are happening too fast. We're losing the identity of who we really are. Do you have that pushback?
Yes, and sometimes they've been right in that I've tried to do change too fast. Change is a very, very complicated thing, and I think as a leader we have to acknowledge the fact that actually change is a permanent state of. You don't just go through a change process and then you're done. Change is a constant thing, and I think we don't understand the difference between change and transition. Change is a situational shift. Most people like change. They don't like the process of getting there.
Of course.
You know, so you're single, and all of a sudden you're married. Yeah, you like that change, but the process of going from a single person to a married person is chaotic, really. And I know some people still living like a single person when they're married. Get off your Xbox. You're 46. That kind of thing. So I think the other thing is understanding the emotional component to change. And I think when I was younger I didn't understand that. To me it was all about vision and strategy and where we're going, and can't you see it? It's so clear to me. Come on, what's wrong with you? Let's just go. Whereas now I think it's like, actually this is a very emotive process, and it's not that most people are resistant. They're not resistant to change. They're sometimes resistant to how they're being asked to change, and the speed and the pace of why they're being asked to change, and because they don't understand the why behind it.
Change suggests you're having to let go of something.
That's right.
When you let go of something, that causes grief.
Yes.
And that's an emotion. So there's an emotional side to change, because I'm letting go of something that is making me feel sad because I liked the way we did it.
The game changer for me with this was something I heard years ago by someone, and he talked about ultimately what you're doing with change is you're trying to take people from here to there. And there is the vision of the future, and that's where I used to live. You know, and I used to think that if I just communicate there powerfully enough and passionately enough, do the old Martin Luther King thing, I have a dream, then everyone's going to say, you're absolutely right, let's pack down what we're doing now, let's forget it and let's go. You have to communicate equally passionately why we can't stay here. Not that here is bad necessarily, though it might be, but there is better. And I think those two components to change are really important. Picture the future that produces passion in you, you know, but also why we can't stay as we are, you know, and that requires incredible intentionality, incredible courage, and a lot of hard work.
It's so powerful, Leon, because we as leaders are tempted to talk about what's going to happen when we change and how things are going to be different, and we don't talk about the why.
Absolutely.
And the what and the how aren't going to fire emotion and passion in me. The why is undeniable.
It's building that compelling enough case, and that can take time. The other thing for me, and I have, when I've done this well, it's gone well, and I haven't sometimes. And always when I haven't done this, it changed, the process doesn't go well. And I learned it years ago, but sometimes I forget it. I work in concentric circles.
Yeah.
So in other words, that tightest circle, that closest circle to me, the leaders, the key staff, the key influencers, then that next circle of leaders and influencers, then that next circle. And if you don't work through those circles, it will bite you.
That's good.
So that means that, and often I'm like less shaped and formed on the inside, a little more, so that you get some weigh-in and some buy-in. And then when it comes out to the wider, to the actual church and beyond that, then it's much more formulated. But every time you go through one of those circles, people have bought in, they've weighed in. You're always leading.
Yeah.
But actually what you're doing is you're trying to help others to shape that and own that and make that part of their story as well.
Yeah. You boys had that? We're changing too fast? You're trying to create an outward-facing church? We used to be doing it then this way, now we're going that way, and we're losing who we are, we're losing our identity?
Yes. Although I have to say, I've been at my church 9 years, from, as you rightly said, Duncan, a pretty a great church, but sort of fairly traditional kind of Baptist church, I guess, into, and we've still got more to go. When I look back over those 9 years, there's been so much change. I mean, honestly, I still can't get my head around how much change. And I would say 90+% of the people have gone with us through that change. Now, a lot of that was because we talked about it before ever I was even appointed to the role, because we were talking about becoming an outward-facing church. Another part is a huge number of people in the church wanted that. They were craving that. But I think that the key thing was, and I remember so vividly saying this to the church in my kind of appointment process, which in Baptist circles means you end up with a Q&A with the whole church, which is quite intimidating. But I said, we may not always agree, but I will always try to help us understand why.
That's good.
If we can understand why, and I do think this, that you know, we know about the bell curve of change and the early adopters and things. Now, you're always going to get the people right on that who just aren't going to go with you. It doesn't matter what you do.
That's right.
They're not going to go with you. But I think you can take everybody else with you if you do what you said, Leon. If you really talk about the why. Why do we need to do this? Why is this important? Why are we doing this? And we just changed our name 2 years ago. So our church was 200 years old last year. And we decided to change the name of our church in the 200th year. I mean, that's like, when I look back on it now, I think that was crazy.
So you've gone from Andover Baptist Church to Chris Porter Tabernacle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. CEO Chris Porter Tabernacle to Andover Community Church, which is, that was a big change. And we did. I'd never heard your concentric circles model, but that's exactly what we tried to do. And I tried to go round personally to the longest standing people in our church to have a conversation with them. And we've got a wonderful lady in our church called Sheila. She's been in our church 90 years.
Wow.
80, 90 years, since she was 3-4 years old. Wow. And can you imagine, and she's not, she wasn't difficult about it at all. She's not going to struggle with that change because she's just being difficult. That's not. She's going to struggle with that change because, understandably, that's all she's known, and she's passionate, and the church has meant everything to her over her life. So I went and had a conversation with her, and again, in our model, our members have to vote for that, and she voted for that change in the end. And that's because we tried to say, and every time we've tried to do a significant change, I've always asked, who are the 10, 20 people who are going to struggle the most with this change? Can I go and have a coffee with them personally and have a conversation? And that's worked sometimes and not others, but in the vast majority of times it's worked really, really well. Yeah.
Very good.
Steve, change?
Yeah, I think for being the founder of the church as well, in a sense, I think in the early stages, I used to always talk about change, and I used to take people through all the changes. So when we looked to introduce something, I would say, do you remember the journey that we had? And literally, I put it on PowerPoint, that we changed here and here. That's right, I know, yeah. But it was always that constant reminder that everything changes and that we are always changing. So likewise, when we've gone through significant changes, we've put it out to what we termed at the time the Joshua groups, which were all of our small group leaders, our serving leaders, leaders, and we would meet in homes, and we would allow for questions and that kind of thing. And so I agree. I think that it's working from the core, where we've done all of the thinking and we know exactly why we're doing what it is that we're doing, and then it's not expecting everyone just to jump on board because they won't. And so it can be a slow process. We did the name change as well, and that was hilarious, really. But we had to just stop it for about 9 months for cooling off, to then come back to it again. It was
It's often hard, isn't it? Because we have often been thinking about change for a long time.
I know.
And then we give it to I expect that they're, again, in our model, sometimes Baptist churches do this thing where they communicate a change and want to vote on it on the same night.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy, right? So we have to understand, and that can be difficult for us because we just want to get on, don't we, by that point. But
I mean, the amazing thing, Steve talks about that name change. I was around in those days working with Steve at the church. And there was this, a year-long process, 9 months cooling off. Some people liked, some people didn't like. People were getting really heated about the whole thing. Once we changed the name, it never got mentioned again.
That's so true.
Like yesterday's news. It's like you got all upset about this, and now no one left. No one's mentioned it. It's just a different reality.
We did a name change as well. Steve, you joined the network, change the name. But interesting, I tried to do it years before we actually did it. Did it so badly that there was a reaction that I left it there like that. And then when we had the fire that destroyed our building, I thought this is a great opportunity. And I brought it back out, went through like that. Wow. Never been in a house, and not missed a heartbeat. And I think sometimes with change, we have to demystify it as well. And actually be okay to say, do you know what, that didn't work. We tried that, it didn't work. And actually say to your people, do you know when we did that? It didn't really work. But the way we were doing it was right. And we need to find a better way to do it. But actually the why was right. And I think people will respect you. I think what they don't respect is where it obviously isn't working. And nobody's saying it isn't working. But we all know it isn't working. It's like the elephant in the room. And I think that's another thing about change, is just demystifying it a little bit. But I do think the pace of change determines the success of change. That if you try to go too fast, and the bigger you are, or the kind of change you're bringing about, like a name change or whatever, if that's a bigger thing, and I think leadership is a science, but it's also an art. And I think that ability to say, do you know what, we've had too much change. I noticed when we came out of COVID, there'd been enough change imposed on our church, so you've got to be careful there how much change you institute, because people are change weary. And I think we got it, and that's the art side of it, where you're discerning where people are, and your core team, your weight carriers, as well as the whole church as well.
Let me go back to that little mic drop moment, because that was brilliant. The pace of change dictates the success of change.
I think
so good. And as visionary leaders, let's change it tomorrow.
Totally.
And maybe we just need to slow down a bit. I love that. That's really good. I asked AI what Carey Nieuwhof might have to say to the pushback of, we're changing too fast. We're trying to become outward focused and you're ignoring insiders. And he said this brilliant. He said, the mission hasn't changed, just the method.
Yeah, it's good.
We have to change the way we do things. We can't do church the way we did it 50 years ago. And he says this, we hold tightly to the message, but loosely to the model. Our identity is in Christ, not our traditions. We will never stop asking how we can better reach the people no one else is reaching. Really wise words,
That's
I think.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's push on to the next one. Steve, I'm going to ask you. This is a great one. Again, I've heard this said to me, and I've heard other leaders say, how do I deal with it when people say this? And it's like, it's a budget question. You seem to be spending so much more money on production. I mean, I go to the Forge, and you've got moving lights, flashing lights, drums, electric guitars. You spend a lot of money on that production side of stuff. You make great videos as well. And again, people say marketing as well. You spend all this money on marketing and flyers and websites and social media. How do you push back on that? Jesus never had a marketing campaign or a marketing team. Jesus didn't have a moving head or a microphone. How do you push back? How do you deal with that kind of pushback?
I think for me, marketing is letting people know who we are and what it is that we can, what benefit or what it is that we can offer to people. So So that's what marketing is. And I think, when I grew up in a little Brethren chapel, a little tin hut of a gospel hall, and our marketing was the notice board outside with a poster that had been there about 75 years of a mountain with a Bible verse and the timings of the service, and so that was our marketing. And it was cheap, but it wasn't very effective. That's right. So I want our community to know that we're there, and that we care.
Yeah.
Those two things, that we're there, that we care. And so our marketing needs to be around that. How do we let people know? For us, we don't have the pleasure of having our own building. We have to hire. And so once we leave on a Sunday lunchtime and we've packed everything away, we become invisible.
Yeah.
So we're just not, people can't come to the Forge because there isn't a place to come to. And so for us, it was a while back, we said, we had this little phrase that we wanted to be known, involved and helpful. And so to be known, what's the best way? Honestly, during COVID, we were best known because everyone was going online, and that's where they could find us.
Interesting.
And so therefore, for us to be intentional about using social media plays a really important part. For people to be able to see who we are before they ever come plays really an important part. So if I'm standing here and I have to stand on this table, that's a big step. If I can use this chair and then get up there. So the smaller the step, the better it is for people to be able to take steps forward. And so for people to be able to see what the church looks like online, to be able to have one of those little short videos taken from a talk, which might last for a minute, that goes on Instagram so that people can see that. But then if they want to check out more, they can do. And so that when I invite a friend, I haven't got to invite them to church. I can say, well, take a watch of this. What did you think? And then it'll be off the back of that. If you liked it, well, why don't you come with me? And so it's marketing for me is to let people know that we're there and to let them know that we care, so that we can be known, involved and helpful. And it's the intentionality of it. Any church can do that. Any church can do that. You don't have to put lots of resources into it. But I've looked on so many websites where they're still advertising Last Christmas.
Yes, exactly.
And that just gives a poor demonstration of where the church is at. And so therefore, it requires time and it requires skill to know how to make best use of it. And so therefore, we will put finances towards people being able to do that. I mean, we put a tiny amount towards paid ads, Facebook ads, but we do. And we've got a guy called JB Gill from JLS coming on the first Sunday in September. And as soon as we put a Facebook an ad out, we are just seeing names of people we've never heard of before. Because they're interested to come along. Well, if that's a way to be for them to be introduced to church, he's not going to be there the following week, but it's the first introduction to church again. So
Facebook ads are pennies.
Absolutely. So for me, so to be intentional about marketing is we want to be known and we want to be involved. And I think when it comes to the production, we do operate again on one of the foundations of the network, which is to one of them is to have a come and see culture. And so therefore, we want to be able to create environments that when people come and they come for the first time, that they are welcomed, but they can hear well, they can see well, they feel comfortable. That when we've created videos, and again, it's just a different means of being able to communicate something. And a creative way of being able to do that as well. So therefore, for me, being able to create this come and see culture, I want that consistency so that when they can bring a friend any week and they kind of know what they're coming to. And as I said, they can see really clearly the words of the songs, the words of the Bible readings that we would use and the presentations. They'd be able to see the videos, they'd be able to hear the speaker. And PA and lights and videos and all of that, they just cost money to buy, they cost money to maintain, and they cost money to replace. And sadly, PA desks and things like that cost a fortune. They just really cost a fortune. And so, hence we need to budget towards those things.
I've been to your place, and you've got productions high at your place. You've got 2 cameras at the back, huge kind of sound desk, plus everything that's on stage. Do you look at the budget line of it and everything? Goodness gracious me, it's a small house.
Sometimes, I do, but I think Steve's absolutely right. I think for me, in terms of dealing with the pushback, I think you've got to keep tying this conversation into people. You know what, like Steve's really good at this as well. And I think when you can start telling stories, and for us in the last few years, the baptisms, nearly all of the baptism stories I watched online, I watched on Facebook, I responded to a Facebook ad. Do you know what I mean? And then don't just hear that, tell those stories.
Absolutely.
When you get that pushback, say, do you remember the last baptism? There was like half of those stories. Did you hear that? Someone mentioned this. You tie it into people all the time. And I think that's really, really important, because ultimately, if the pushback is about, we're all about business and money, we're like, no, they're all means to an end.
Absolutely.
You end up people's lives being changed, and that's our why, isn't it? You know, so I think it's always tying it back to people. Really, that's important.
Going back to the business idea as well. I mean, if you're a business and you're thinking, goodness me, we're having success doing this one thing, why would you not put more resource behind it? You know, and if you're saying our aim is to see people who are lost get found, and most of the people that are lost who get found say it's because of Facebook, it's because of watching online. Why would you not do it? Why would you not spend a fair bit of your budget in enabling that to be the way in which people find and follow Jesus?
And I think just connecting back to the last question about change, and you talked about the lady in your church that's been there for a long time. I think what I try to do a lot now, which I didn't used to do in the early days, and that was my mistake, is tell the stories of what's gone on before. Because actually those people, they did that.
Yes, they did.
But they used leaflets, and they put leaflets through doors to reach people. Whereas now, there's another better way to do it. So the mission hasn't changed, but the method has. And I think the more you tell stories about what's gone on before you, in our case it's nearly 50 years, and yours is 200, not you personally.
Thank you for clarifying.
But I think then you build on we're standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before, and I think you honour the past, not by living in it, but by recognising it and trying to build. And I think they did that within their budget understanding of the world in which they lived. They did go from a hymn book to an overhead projector. Do you know what I mean? And they had pushback when they did that. Remember the pushback that you got? It's the same. And I think, again, demystifying it a little bit and just reminding people that the music was too loud. The music they liked was too loud for their parents.
That organ's far too loud.
That's right, So again, I think just demystifying it, teaching into it, but all the time anchoring back to the why of people, really.
So Chris, in your church, you employ someone called Chris full time to do production stuff. So there's a whole wage on your staff for someone to make videos, to do websites, to do production stuff. Do you get pushback about saying, why are we not employing a minister and we're employing someone to do...
Well, everybody loves him, so and to be fair, what we did when I first arrived at the church, he was already on the team working 2 days a week. So it was actually quite easy for us to say, can you see the difference Chris is making to this or this or this or to the... I mean, and you know, we still do paper stuff sometimes, or car, you know, to go out at Christmas. You know, don't you want that to... Thank you. Don't you want that to look the best it possibly can for your friend that you're going to be using it, and it could be a digital input or whatever. So in fact, it was quite easy because we could... So my advice for what it's worth would be to say, you know, if you've got anything you can do, if you're not employing somebody, you're not doing that at the moment, is there anything that you can do to start that off so people see the benefit of it, so you've got the stories to tell, so then you can grow it. Our friend Ryan, who we know, who runs a marketing agency, he's just met with some of our team because we're struggling for the amount of social media stuff we'd like to do for the people that we need to do it. And I just thought he had a brilliant idea. He just said, look, gather a few people who you know, look out for the people in your church who are best on social media, and then invite them once a month to meet, buy them pizza, and just create the plan and ask them to take a week at a time to just queue up those posts and post them 1 week a month each, take away. I thought it was a brilliant idea, and it doesn't cost that costs you some pizza, because I suspect every one of us have got people in our church who are brilliant at social media, who we see on social media, we think, gosh, they're really, really good at that. Now you need to give them some boundaries to play in, right? The playing field that you're asking them to play on. But a monthly meeting with them where you feed them and then ask them just to do some. So I thought that was a really good idea for the marketing thing. I think the production thing. I don't know there's any shortcuts to that. It is expensive, and that, although you can do, I think you can do a lot with lights quite cheaply. LED lights these days are much cheaper, so you can even again in smaller church settings. I think you can do quite a lot with lights for not very much money. But
I think we have to be careful as well that we don't succumb to the idea that you can't reach people unless you've got money.
Yes.
And I think that's not right neither. So I think we have to be careful that it isn't just all about how much money we got. One quick funny story on the reach on the Facebook ads. We're looking to plant a church in a town about 20 minutes from us next year. So we've done a paid ad on Facebook and Instagram and talking about, hey, we've got this interest meetings, we'd love to see you there. The reach has been incredible. The first time it went out, it says new church coming to this town. The first comment was, can't we have an M&S instead? Which I thought was hysterical. But actually, the 60 people that came to that first meeting, half of them were unknown to us, who all said came through social media.
Gosh.
Just checking it out. And I think the reach of that kind of stuff is phenomenal, really. And that's where people are. And it's all about people. It's all about reaching people.
So I asked AI what Carey might say about this pushback of spending too much money on marketing and too much money on production. Carey said this: people decide in the first few minutes whether they'll come back. If the message is eternal, it's worth presenting in a way that's engaging and respectful of people's attention. We're not putting on a show, he says. We're removing distractions and making space for encounter.
That's great. That's very good.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to move on to, I think, the final one before we dive into a few quick fire ones. Again, I've heard this so often. We're becoming seeker sensitive. And it's this battle between seeker sensitive and spiritual maturity. You seem to major on the seeker sensitive. We want spiritually mature people. They seem to be exclusive. We're majoring on the seeker sensitive and we're losing the spiritual maturity. Do you get that kind of pushback?
Yes, we do. And I have to say, Leon's been so kind, hasn't he, in reminding us to be gracious, because this is one where I really struggle to be gracious. It is honestly the truth, because I feel very passionately about this one. For me, we are never more like Jesus than when we are willing to sacrifice our time, energy, money, preferences and likes for the sake of people who are lost.
Wow, that's good.
Because what did Jesus say? What was his mission? I've come to seek and to save the lost. And if the goal of spiritual maturity is to become more like Jesus, which I absolutely think it is, we'd all agree on that, then surely the more passionate we are about lost people, the more like Jesus we're becoming. So we've said this lots of times in this conversation, it's not either or. It's both and.
That's right.
The more passionate we get about lost people, the more spiritually mature we're becoming. Because the more willing we are to do. And just a little story, if I may. We were having a gift day at our church a few weeks ago, because we need to create some more space because we've got too many unchurched people who want to come, and we were doing a bunch of devotions in the week leading up to it with our elders, our leaders, and our staff. And I was actually on an early morning trip out to see some of our churches in the Channel Islands. And so I was at the airport. I was very bleary-eyed because it was very early in the morning. And I opened up the devotion for that day. It's a story of the paralysed man being lowered down through the roof to meet Jesus. So a story that if you've been around church, like I have all my life, goodness knows how many times I've heard that story. So it's not deep, right? However, as I read it, I felt this sense of, gosh, how passionate were those men who carried their friend about their friend seeing Jesus, that they would go to that length. And I felt like I was being a little bit selfish, because I realised I was being selfish, because I was saying, Lord, when it comes to my friends and my family, I'd do anything, barring sin, anything for them to meet Jesus. That's what I want more than anything. Of course I would do that. And I just felt God give me one of those nudges and say, that's how I feel about everybody. Right. Everybody matters to me as much as your friends and family matter, and as much as that man on that. And it was just one of those moments where I thought, this is the difference again between deep and profound. Profound impact on me. A story I've read millions of times, where I just went, what would I sacrifice for the sake of a lost person who I don't know coming to know Jesus? Well, the answer should be pretty much everything. And so we were compelled to give in a way we'd not given before, and all of that kind of stuff. And it was a profound and life-changing moment, really, for me. And I thought, this is spiritual maturity, when we allow stories we've heard before, stories from the life of Jesus, to so deeply impact us that we will do something about it. and our passion for the lost increases. So I really struggle when it gets presented as an either or, because I think it's not either or, and we are showing our spiritual maturity when we become more and more and more passionate about lost people. So that's how I try to answer that without telling people they're spiritually immature, which would be insensitive.
Do you get that, Steve? Do you get that kind of battle between spiritual maturity and seeker sensitiveness, and people feeling the Forge is erring on the side of being seeker sensitive, and we're ignoring the needs to be spiritual?
Absolutely, and at times we are as well. At times I would definitely say that we haven't always done well at that growing up and of that kind of stronger spiritual maturity, so it's something which I if people say it, I'll say, yeah, sometimes we get it wrong. I'm really sorry. That's not my intention. It's not our intention as a church, but sometimes we don't do good with it.
Again, I think articulating to people in our church, wherever we do that, the tensions that we're trying to because again, Andy Stanley says this is not a problem to solve. It's a tension to manage. We can solve the problem. We'd just be seeker sensitive, or just be really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Profound, deep is not profound, and that solves the problem, but we don't go anywhere, but actually to maintain the tension, embrace the tension. And I think to articulate it to people and to say, this is why we do this and this is why we're doing that. And this is what we're working on. And we know we've got lots of weak areas that we need to develop. And, and I think just being real about that, I think that's a good way to handle the feedback, the pushback rather, as well. But Chris is absolutely right. All the time, we've got to keep saying, the ultimate goal of spirituality is becoming more and more like Jesus, and he was passionate about those people who didn't know Jesus.
You remember Bill Hybels? I can always remember listening to him at a conference saying really loudly and getting people to shout back at him. He said, "Whose responsibility is it for your spiritual maturity? Whose responsibility is it for you to grow up in Jesus?" He said, "I want you to shout back at me, it is my responsibility." He said, "I ask that of my people in churches." I mean, we all know where Hybels ended up in that, but just that idea that we think it's the pastor's job. I'm not spiritually mature and it's your job. You failed me as a preacher, as a pastor. Actually, I need to take responsibility for my own spiritual growth and my own spiritual development. So don't pin that on me. And I kind of understand what Steve says. Christians are going to go to heaven. They're saved. Their eternity sorted out. There are people out there who are going to a lost eternity. Maybe we should skew towards them at times.
And again,
that's right. That's big.
And partly as a leader, evangelism would be one of my strengths. One of the gifts that God has given. And so therefore that will also probably be reflected across the church because of my role.
Speed of the leader, speed of the team.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas if I was a Bible teacher or whatever, then I think the emphasis of that would probably
when you look at those 5 things in Ephesians 4, apostolic, prophetic, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, we are as leaders going to be stronger in one of those things, and actually your strength will determine how you view success.
Yes.
So if your primary one is a shepherd, success for you is when everyone feels loved, everyone's getting on well, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a teacher, it's when everyone's growing and knowledge is going, taking notes, and and I think that's important as well. And because we're more apostolic evangelists, that's how we see it. But I think that's where Chris said earlier on about it's a plurality of leadership. If you're not wired that way, somebody on your team has to be. You have to find the right kind of people. And we've got this incredible pastoral person on our team. She's so patient with people. She can listen to criticism all day long, deal with difficult counselling situations all day long, and it never drains. She's amazing. I can't do that. And I don't think we can do that. Might be wrong, but you need it in your team. And I think then when you're trying to deal with some of this pushback, I would also say don't try and do it all on your own. Actually it might be, hey, could you have a conversation with so-and-so? Maybe one of your elders or one of your staff or someone else, because maybe they can help that person in a way that you can't as a leader as well.
So I'm going to tell you what Carey thinks about this question, how he would answer this question, and then I'm going to ask you a deeply personal question that I'd love a deeply personal answer from, and then we'll bang out some quick fire questions. Carey, according to AI, about this idea of seeker-sensitive versus spiritual maturity, Carey said a truly mature believer is someone who cares deeply about those who are far from God, which is great, isn't it? Maturity isn't about depth of knowledge, It's about depth of love and obedience. We're not seeker sensitive, we're mission sensitive.
Yeah, that's great.
Really good. He puts it so well, doesn't he? Here's my deeply personal question, Chris, Steve, Leon. When these pushbacks, these criticisms come, how does it make you feel? How do you cope when people are saying the church you're leading isn't good, it's bad, and I don't like it and I'm upset with it? How do you deal with that pressure? Do you go to bed at night and can't sleep? Do you moan to your missus about it? How do you deal with the nastiness, the emails, the conversations?
Take it personally. There we go. That's the best thing.
Yeah.
I always take it personally, and that's good then, because I think that it shows that I care.
Yeah, that's right.
And I would definitely have sleepless nights, and it will churn around in me, and it will do that for a period of time before it slowly drifts, or I'll have arguments in my head about it as well. Do you know what I mean? And trying to justify and all of that. So, but yeah, it definitely hurts.
Yeah, I've changed my mind a little bit on this. I would have said years ago, "Oh, don't take it personally," and now I do, like Steve said, but in a different way than I used to take it before. So I would say don't take it personally, but I did take it personally as a criticism to me. Now I take it personally that it hurts when someone leaves, because we're not an organisation, we are a family. That's the biblical language. So when someone walks away, that hurts me. It hurts me, but it doesn't destroy me like maybe it used to. And damage me in that way. So I think for me, I always want to. I remember when I was younger, I'd see older leaders that had actually they would hurt all the time, so they would grow a thick skin, but they'd also have a hard heart, and others who would have a thin skin and a soft heart, so they would get hurt too much. For me, I want a soft heart and a thicker skin, so that it does hurt me when people leave, but it doesn't destroy them. Because actually, if they're a Christian and they leave, they're going on to another place, they're going on to heaven. But actually, we're going to reach lost people. And again, we're not a gang. So when someone leaves us, we're not a gang. You know, we're part of the body of Christ. If they go somewhere else, that's great. But I think the mission has to be so compelling. If your mission isn't compelling, you're never going to make it through pushback.
Yeah, it's good.
And if it isn't compelling for you, and you don't absolutely believe it in the core of your being, that this is why God has called you and put you on this planet to help create outward-facing churches, you won't make it through pushback. Or if you go through pushback, you'll lose something in the process, and you'll just coast it out, you know. And I think, so for me, it does hurt. It still does hurt, but it doesn't hurt in the way it used to. And I'm glad about that. But it does still hurt, because I think you care, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm absolutely same as guys. It really hurts. I think most people who go into church leadership do it because they love people.
Absolutely.
So when people that you love, or people that you are unhappy, upset, leave, whatever, of course that you know. And I mean, my natural tendency would be to be a people pleaser. So my big concern is sometimes that I'd not go as far as we should, you know, because I'm worried about people. So it definitely hurts. I definitely have sleepless nights about it. The only way I have found to kind of do what you're talking about, slightly thicker skin, soft heart, is to be absolutely so sure about what the mission is, so sure about what my calling is. And in the early years, I wasn't so sure. Now I'm really clear about what the calling is, calling to build outward facing churches. That has to run hotter in me than my need for people to like me. And that is a real, so I have to fuel that. So I have to be a part of a network and a tribe of people where I'm meeting with others who feel the same way. Because on those tough days, and you think, am I mad? Is this? Are we really supposed to be doing this? And then I get together with others. I think, we are supposed to be doing it. And then you hear the stories, and you remember the stories of life change. I keep an encouragements book. Somebody told me that very early on in my ministry. Every email gets printed where somebody says something nice to me. Put in the book, cards, everything. It's just all kept in a book.
And the bad emails.
Because I can then go back and reference that. So that's the only way I've found to really keep being able to push on.
So what I'm hearing is no leader is exempt from pushback, from snotty emails, from tough conversations, from criticism. No one's exempt from it. But what I'm also hearing is that if you're not receiving that, maybe you're not creating an outward-facing church. Maybe you're not leading people in a new direction. Maybe you're settling for second best and settling for comfort.
And I think there are seasons. There are definitely seasons where I think, gosh, we're getting a lot of this right now, and I don't quite know why. Sometimes I think, why is this happening now? Seem to get a bunch of, and then there are other seasons where it just seems to, we don't get that. I think the alternative to being a leader who is sensitive about this stuff, as we're all saying we are, is to be a kind of a narcissistic kind of leader. And to be honest, we see some of those in our world today. And they're not great models of leadership, are they? And I think, do you want people leading a church who don't care what people think about the church or whether people leave on? I don't think we do.
No, I think we've got to, and if the church does grow to a size as well, it's even harder at times. We've got to have mechanisms of good, appropriate feedback to see what is going on. Using a biblical example of the shepherd, know the condition of your flocks and herds is there, in that kind of context. I think we've got to have that. So we've got to be listening. And Andy Stanley himself says, if you don't listen to people, eventually you'll be surrounded by people with nothing to say. Exactly. And there's loads of leaders in our world, our culture, and the church that are surrounded by people with nothing to say because they ain't listening. So I think so that's going back to the start. Really, that's where pushback is a challenge. But can also be a gift. Can also be a gift if we can listen to something and take something good out of it as well.
Right, quick fire questions. I've got 3 of them. I need some quick fire answers. Bang, bang, bang. All right. Let's dive right in. Pushback number 1 in the quick fire section. We've forgotten about prayer and Bible reading and the work of the Holy Spirit. That's the kind of pushback. Quick fire answer.
Yeah, maybe at times we have, and at times we need to listen to that, I think. But also, I think we need to, for us, it's like actually, we keep saying none of what we're talking about is an excuse or is a, for the work of the Holy Spirit and the need for passionate prayer. But if it was just down to the work of the Holy Spirit in prayer, all of our churches in our nation would be very different than it is now. So there's got to be something on our side of it. So I think there is a pushback which we do need to listen to at times, but actually we need to, again, like we've said, we need to frame it. It's not either or, it's both and.
And it's not, and relying on the Holy Spirit is not an excuse for lack of intentionality. Because I think sometimes I've heard that, and what people mean is, I prepped my sermon at half an hour before the service started this morning because I was being inspired by the Spirit.
That's right.
Well, that's not, because the Spirit can inspire you way in advance of that.
And the way in which prayer is worked out within the life of the church will adapt and change as well. And so from the traditional prayer meeting that, I grew up, that was my upbringing, for people's diaries and stuff like that, doesn't work. And so therefore it has to be adapted and changed.
Andy Stanley said these are non-negotiables: prayer, Bible reading, Holy Spirit. But we don't lead with language that confuses outsiders. Instead, we build pathways into community, prayer, and spirit-empowered living over time. These are foundational, but not forgotten. It's a great way of saying it. Okay, quick fire number 2. Church is supposed to be relevant, but not entertaining.
Relevant?
Not entertaining. The number of times I've heard people say, you're just in the entertainment business. You're doing stuff just to entertain us. I know it's supposed to be relevant because Jesus was relevant, but you're not supposed to be entertaining.
Yeah, see, I would, for me, there's a different word that's important. So I'm not sure we are trying to entertain. I do think we are trying to engage.
It's good.
And I would say, actually, a great opener to a service, a great video, a great whatever it is, it engages people, and why shouldn't we have some fun too sometimes? Because sometimes think they equate entertainment with having some fun or having a laugh or playing a silly game, whatever. Why shouldn't we do that? I mean, that's part of what it means to be human and part of what it means to be Christian, isn't it? So I would say you're absolutely right. It's not supposed to be entertainment, but it is supposed to be engaging, and engaging sometimes means connecting in culturally, like Paul did. Or relating to where somebody's at, a style of music that they are used to, whatever. And we're not trying to entertain, but we are trying to engage.
And Jesus' stories were entertaining. That's why people would gather to listen. So and again, it was in order for people to engage.
I think I don't know when I heard this or whether it's a long time ago, but I think one of the meanings of the word entertainment is to capture the imagination of.
That's right.
I know when I heard that. It was just in the back of my head.
John talk about that.
If that's what it is, that's what Jesus did, and that's what we're meant to be. We've got something the most important message on the face of the planet. So, like, why would we not want to capture the attention of our world and our culture?
Who was it who said the greatest sin you can commit with the Bible is to make it boring?
Kerry Newhoff said, a compelling experience isn't the same as entertainment. We don't create moments for applause. We create moments for transformation. Excellence isn't about performance. It's about removing barriers and earning trust. Final quick fire question, and it's one that us in the Further Faster Network get a bit of pushback on. I've had it. I think we've all had it. This Further Faster thing seems it's all based on North American models of church. It's all America. It's Andy Stanley. They're contextually so different to us. Why should we follow what the Americans say? You heard that?
Yes, heard that. Yeah, and I don't think we should just follow what the Americans say. I think we have to take the principle of something and then look to apply it to our own setting. So I've been to North Point. It's slightly bigger than our church, and our church is in rural Suffolk, meeting in a community centre. But I have learnt so much. From them and the principles, and even some of the language used. I think that's what really excited me was he was saying everything that I've felt all of my life, but I've never been able to express properly. And so we can't copy them. It's ridiculous to think that we can copy them, but we can learn from them.
I love what you say about principles. You don't cut and paste what North Point do in rural Suffolk.
No.
But the principle of what they're trying to do,
Absolutely.
you can easily cut and paste and adapt and contextualize.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You heard that before?
Yes, I have, but I think Steve said everything about it, really. I think I would just add that these principles are not North American, they're global.
Well done.
That's what I would say. So
Well
yes,
done.
Andy Stanley and the North Point, they have a platform to be expressing these because they've seen such amazing things happen, and the number of people who've come to faith and all of that. That's grown a platform where they are able to share these principles with us. But those principles work anywhere. I've been to West Africa, Sierra Leone, capital of Sierra Leone. We have a partner church there, and they are, before ever we knew them, they are using exactly the same principles, not because they know about North Point, but because they're passionate about lost people in Freetown. It looks completely different, but it's fantastic. So it's global principles. The platform where they're getting expressed from is in North America. I get that, but they're not North American principles.
So Leon, you're a pastor of a church, but you also work with us as a network, and your job is to help churches join our network. Do you get that pushback from other churches saying, I kind of like it, but it's a bit American for us?
All the time.
And how do you respond?
I think for me, Steve's absolutely right. It is about contextualising. I think it's also a little bit reflective of our posture sometimes. You know, for me, I want to learn from anyone and everybody. You know, and if I can learn from anyone of how to create a more effective outward-facing churches that reaches lost people in our context, surely we've got the humility to want to do that. Really, I think it's a little bit. We've got to check ourselves really when we have that kind of reaction, because that could be a little bit xenophobic. Really, or it's American, almost like. Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit racist almost.
It is almost like that, really. And I think it isn't about whether it's American or not. Is it working? Is it true? Is there something? Is there a principle here?
Does it resonate?
Does it resonate? Does it connect with us? Then let's have that openness. And what I love about the guys over there as well is that they've got that posture. They're just because they're bigger than any of us, they're saying, but we want to learn from you. So actually, God is doing something in the global church, I think, creating a different kind of spirit, really, where we're trying to learn from one another, and that's healthy.
And I think the other thing, so I've worked in the past for American businesses where it really did feel like, everybody else was playing second fiddle. And like your point about the folks we've met at North Point, I think is so important, because it's so the complete opposite of my experience with American business world. Their humility, their posture, their willingness to do anything to help, to understand we're a different context. That for me is really, really important. So people may have come across some situations where it hasn't, maybe that transatlantic relationship hasn't been so helpful. But I would just say to people, our experience has been very different with the people we're linked up.
Who was it who famously said, I hate all Americans, apart from the ones I've met?
That's right.
Which is so true, isn't it? Right. So confession time, just to close this down. 1994, I started a church along with 6 others in Banbury, and we had no idea what we were doing. It was like, what do we do now? None of us had started a church before. We started it, 6 of us around a dining room table. And very early on in that whole process, Leon calls me and he says, there's an American called Andy Stanley and an American called Bill Hybels. They're coming to Reading and I've got 2 tickets. Do you want to come with me? And I said to Leon, no way. Confession time. What can an American teach me about church? I'm not interested. And he said, come on, Duncan, we'll have fun. We'll go have something to eat afterwards. Let's go. So just because Leon's my mate, I went along. And I said, it was really funny. Everyone else is sat there with a workbook and a pen ready to write down. I didn't take a pen or a workbook. I sat like this. As they began to speak, within the first couple of sentences, I found myself tapping on the shoulders of people saying, "You got a spare bit of paper?" Because this is the day before iPads, and I kind of, "Have you got a pen? Can somebody let me?" And I took note after note after note, and I had to go home and say, "I'm sorry, Lord." Almost xenophobia. It was almost racist. What can they teach me? And I had to be open-handed and say, actually, I learned, and with the church, I started to put those principles you talked about into practice, and we grew to 250 people over a 9-year period in a really difficult place. It was incredible. What a journey. But it was because of what I learned from those guys, because I was open-handed enough to say, okay, teach me. I want to learn.
So good.
Guys, thank you for your time today. I think this has been a really helpful discussion, and I can't wait for the next one.